Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we'll be painting up a Primaris Lieutenant. Now I've already textured the model and assembled up to the point where it gets in the way of painting, and I've already primed it. Now starting with Ironbreaker, what we're going to do is we're going to paint all the armor everywhere with Ironbreaker, including the inside of the shield. And now with Abaddon Black and Nuln Oil in a 1-to-1-ish mix, we're going to cover all the metal parts that we just painted with this, except for the helmet. And once that is done, we're going to go back to Ironbreaker and we're going to do a light dry brush all over the model, focusing on the edges of his armor. In the end, it looked a little bit too bright, so I went back with the Abaddon Black and Nuln Oil mix and darkened it again. This is a back and forth between getting it silvery on the edges and keeping it dark. So keep going back and forth between the dry brushing and the inking to get the exact color or depth and darkness that you like. And now with Steel Legion Drab, Baneblade Brown, and Rakarth Flesh, we're going to paint his cloak. Now we'll start off with a base layer of Steel Legion Drab all over. Now once that is done, we're going to do a 1-to-1 mix of Steel Legion Drab and Baneblade Brown. And this is going to cover 80 to 90% of the cloak. Only the deepest, darkest recesses will have pure Steel Legion Drab. And then with pure Baneblade Brown, we're going to paint like 70 to 80% of all the model, focusing on the upper raised areas, or all the cloak. And now once that's done, we're going to do a 2-to-1 Baneblade Brown to 1 part Rakarth Flesh mix, and we're going to paint like maybe 40 to 50% of the cloak. We're going to focus on highlighting and the raised areas and edges. And once that is done, we're going to do a 1-to-1 of Baneblade Brown and Rakarth Flesh on the thin highlights, like 20 to 30% maybe of the cloak is going to have this. The upper raised areas, the bends, the edges, and the frills of the cloak are going to have this. And then finally at the very end, a few small areas can have some pure Rakarth Flesh. And now with AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, we're going to use this varnish and we're going to seal in the cloak right now. Now this varnish makes it have a very clothy, leathery appearance after you apply it, so it's very good for the cloak. And now with Rhinox Hide, we're going to paint the leather belt that's around his waist. And now with Mournfang Brown, Doomball Brown, and Nuln Oil, we're going to paint the various sword scabbard, gun holster, and equipment pouches on him. We will start off with Mournfang Brown on the sword scabbard and like his square little box in the back. And once that is done, we're going to apply Nuln Oil all over it. And once that is done, we're going to highlight the edges of the scabbard and box, and as well as draw lines on the scabbard to add like some more texture or flavor to it. And since that looks good enough, we're going to move on to the Doomball Brown, and we're going to use this to paint the gun holster and any other little items he has. Then once that dries, we're going to go over it with Nuln Oil again. And then we're going to go back with Doomball Brown and we're going to highlight. We're going to focus on all the edges, and you will see with the Nuln Oil that there are some raised and lower areas in the very fine details of the model, and we're just going to paint lines over the raised areas to add like highlights and shadow into it. And with Fenrisian Grey, Abaddon Black, Wide Scar, and a 0.25mm precision pen that I keep forgetting to show here, but we're going to start off by base coating all the shoulder pads, the center of his backpack, and any place that we want to be white with the Black Templar white. We're going to base it with Fenrisian Grey. Now we're going to take our micro pen and we're going to lay out the basic dimensions of the cross there that's going to be on his shoulder pad. And once that is done, we're going to try to fill it in with Abaddon Black. Now it's going to be a back and forth between painting the cross and then refining the cross with Fenrisian Grey, so it's a back and forth. This is a back and forth between these two colors. After a long time, once you finally get the image down to looking pretty good, go and fill in all the Fenrisian Grey with White Scar White. Now with Corn Red, Mephiston Red, and Evil Sun Scarlet, we're going to go and we're going to paint the Purity Seals and his helmet. We're going to start off with Corn Red as our base layer. They will then go to Mephiston Red, and when painting the helmet, we want to cover basically 90 to 95% of the entire helmet except for the very corners and little recesses inside the helmet. As far as the Purity Seals, we want to paint the center and the outer rim of each seal. We're also doing the gun as well, and after it has a base layer of Corn Red, we're going to go over it with the Mephiston Red and basically cover all the plates with it. We just want the folds or the recesses to have the Corn Red showing. I use Agrex Earthshade on the gun to make it slightly different than the rest of the reds and stuff. This will also cover the metallic parts of the gun. Now, looking back, I didn't do too well. I should have thinned this out a bit, but no, here we are. So I use this all over the gun. And now with Mephiston Red going back over the gun, I highlight all the edges of the gun. Now looking back, this really didn't do well, it didn't look good. What I should have done was essentially cover 80 to 90% of all the red parts with Mephiston Red, focusing on the raised areas first, and so the creases and the lower areas would be darker red. That's what I should have done. And while I was at it, I decided to add some Fenrisian Grey along the crest of his helmet there, and then we're going to go back with White Scar White right afterwards and paint it white, because adds more veteran status-y like things to it. And then with Steel Legion Drab, Baneblade Brown, and Agrex Earthshade, we're going to do the Purity Seals. We're going to start off with a basic layer of Steel Legion Drab all over the Purity Seals. Once that's done, we're going to do Baneblade Brown on the purity seals. We're going to do all the edges of the paper and the creases as well as like raised areas. Use your judgment on this. Once that is done, we're going to give them all a layer of Agrax Earthshade. And once that has dried, we're going to go back with Baneblade Brown and we're going to do all the edges, the upper edges on the higher portion of the purity seals, and then all the creases, and use your judgment if you want to put a little more on the center areas. And now with Warpstone Glow, Snarsnick Green, and Beal Tan Green, we're going to paint his eyes. We're going to start off with a base layer of Warpstone Glow in his eyes. And once that's done, we're going to try to fill them in with Snarsnick Green. And once that is done, we're going to wash it with Beal Tan Green to add darkness and, well, make it look better to clean up any mistakes we made. And once that is done, we go back with Snarsnick Green and try to fill out like where the focus is, or the center of his eyes. Basically, think of his eyes as glass lenses as pupils, and the Snarsnick Green will be like the dot where he's looking. Now with that done, what we're going to do is we're going to take Ironbreaker and we're just going to paint all these little metallic pieces. His shield has these little metal thingies on it, as well as a key, his belt buckle, sides of his helmet, any place that there's basically silver stuff. Ironbreaker's a pretty good metallic paint. And now with XV88, Mephiston Red, Abaddon Black, and Fenrisian Grey, we're going to paint his heraldric shield on his chest. So we're going to try to copy the box art, or one of the images on the artwork. So I'm going to start with covering XV88 on one side of his heraldry entirely. Then I'm going to use Mephiston Red to cover the bottom right quarter of his shield. Then I'm going to use Abaddon Black to fill the top right quarter of his shield, as well as paint the edges of the entire shield itself, since I missed it during the inking process. Now with my finest tipped brush, I'm going to take some Fenrisian Grey and I'm going to paint 5 little squares into the black, as well as you've noticed that there's a black line that goes through the red. Now when painting this heraldric thing, you have to know that you can't really just tap 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 dab with the tip of the brush and you're going to get the fine lines. What you're having to do is very fine, refined brush strokes in single lines, and that's where you're going to get your sharp lines from. So this is a process of going back over with the different colors. It's sort of like a puzzle, because you have to paint a straight line in a certain order in order to get the pattern you want. So I do some of the black, I do some of the Fenrisian, and I do the XV88 to shore up the side, because thin, simple strokes in one direction is what I do to get the thin lines. So you have to plan this out and do it in the right order with the right colors, and then eventually after some refinement you'll get a pretty pretty good symmetrical heraldry. And now with Skeleton Horde Contrast and Guilliman Flesh, we're going to paint the aging and dirtying of the exhaust ports on the back of the armor. We're going to start off with Skeleton Horde Contrast, and we're going to yellow all the metal. And once that is done, we're going to take Guilliman Flesh and place it in the centermost areas of his exhaust ports in order to dirty them. And now we're going to take some Army Painter Anti-Shine Matte Varnish, and we're going to apply this to every place that we believe this model is going to get grabbed. Like places where you would normally grab the Space Marine model that's going to be touched the most, just to seal it in. Back of the backpack, the head, parts of its arms, parts of its legs, you know. And then with AK Interactive Ultra Matte, we're going to go back and we're going to paint his shoulder pads, the places that are white, and all the purity seals. It has a good effect to make it look leathery, clothy, or like paper in some cases. And now we assemble a lot of the model up to the point where it's going to get in the way of the gold. Now the gold paint that I'm going to use is always sticky, so I want to get the backpack on because there's usually gold on the back and it ruins it if I try to force the thing together. So we want to assemble up to the point where it's not going to get in the way, but what I should have done is also assemble his, his other arm. That caused me some trouble. And while I add it, I edge the base with Mournfang Brown. And now with Vallejo Liquid Copper, we're going to apply this to most of his metallics as the base layer, because this is going to be the dark depth, and we're going to highlight later with other colors. Now with Vallejo Liquid Gold Old Gold, we're going to cover maybe 70 to 80% of all the brass areas, and this is basically the highlights. And now with Vallejo Liquid Gold color, we're going to use this as the highlight on the gold. We're basically going to, for all the parts that has old gold, imagine like maybe about 50% of that is going to be coated in this as the highlight, focusing on the upper raised areas. And then with Vallejo Liquid Silver, we're going to apply this to the very fine edges and upper raised areas. Less is more. We just want small amounts of this on the edges. And then once that's done, I do a final assembly. And now for my final thoughts. Now this Primaris Lieutenant, I'm going to have to give my work a 6 out of 10. This time there were some things went well, some things did not go well, but a lot of things did not go well. So the Volkite pistol has very little artwork attached to it. I don't know if it's a glowing weapon, I don't know any details about it, so I didn't paint a glow there, and there's barely anything in the artwork that attributes to that. And the highlighting that I did on the pistol with the Hagrex Earth Shade, it just didn't look that good. It's sort of like, okay, just if you see the model, get rid of the pistol and the helmet, and then it looks good. But the pistol and the helmet are okay, and because they're okay, they're noticeably different than the rest of the model. The rest of the model is good except for those two things, and they drag it down. The helmet, the red, I just couldn't get it right. As well as the eyes, I took a look afterwards and noticed that the actual eye slits is much smaller, so I screwed that up. The red is not that good on the gun or the helmet. I just couldn't seem to do it right. The rest of the model is really good, but these two things are so much lower on quality in comparison that they really drag it down. Despite the fact that the shield looks freaking amazing, the inside looks awesome, the gold looks awesome, the cross heraldry on it all look awesome, and the heraldic shield that I painted on him looks really good, very clean, very sharp. Even though I have very few actual colors and I can't really do that much highlighting with it. Well, what can you do? Well, anyway, now moving on to my next project. My next one is going to be the, I forget what they're called. It's the squad of swordsmen with shields, whatever those are. Alright, like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment on anything or nitpick anything, share if you want to share it. I'll see you guys next time with my next project. Bye.